What do you make of President Trump's comments that NATO troops stood a little off the front line during the Afghanistan war?
It's complete nonsense. It is complete nonsense. I spoke to parents of young men who had lost their lives in Afghanistan, and I think it is a disgrace to denigrate their memory like that. Every November, we celebrate our fallen. It's not just World War I or World War II. It is more recent conflicts like Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think that there is too much careless talk from President Trump. He clearly doesn't know the history of what happened. I'm somebody who believes in NATO. It is a force for good in the world. We need a strong NATO. We mustn't have these sorts of throwaway remarks that actually weaken the strong relationship between those countries in the alliance.
Should President Trump apologise? Should the PM ask for an apology?
I think the PM should ask for an apology, and the PM should ask for a retraction or a clarification of those remarks. Something similar happened when J.D. Vance made comments like that. I remember sending a message, because he's someone who I do know, just saying, I don't think people understood what you said. Would you like to say it again? And he did so. So that would be welcome. But there is far too much random commentary and throwaway remarks that are unhelpful to the NATO alliance.
I mean, you're a politician. You pick your words very carefully. Aren't we just a bit blown away by him saying that?
Well, the fact is, President Trump is President Trump. When he says stuff that we agree with, great. When he says stuff that we disagree with, then I think we should be robust. What I'm most concerned about is the British national interest. I'm interested in what happens in our country and to our country. And I think when we look at a lot of the decisions that have been made, the vote we had a couple of days ago on veterans, this terrible deal with the Chagos Islands, there are too many decisions that are being made as if it's a long time ago, rather than the reality of the increasingly dangerous world that we live in today.
And turning to the local elections, just for clarity, you think they should not be postponed?
We've already had a postponement. A 1-year postponement for local government reorganisation, understandable. But 2 years, more than 2 years, that's just too long. Why is it taking so long for Labour to get organised? And what I've seen is them use quite a lot of bullying tactics to get councils to say they don't want local elections. I think that they should go ahead. That is Conservative Party policy. I know that there are 2 or 3 outlier councils who are doing something different, but that is not our party policy.
Well,
what I want to see is a level playing field. Farmers have to compete with imports from countries that don't necessarily have the same high standards that we do. Let's see what we can do about those standards. We want to see the higher standards. We want to look at the taxes, the regulations, which are stopping them from going into, from continuing with farming. Let's make life easier for them. They feed us. Let's look after them.
We give so much and we get so little in return. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far.
So tracking some comments made that NATO troops stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan and that the US has never necessarily needed us. Well, it's a real shame to hear that. The only time NATO has ever enacted Article 5 was after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, when the United States and the world rallied to the support of the US. Our agencies, our forces, our politicians, we all stood together, shoulder to shoulder, and responded. On Afghanistan, frankly, this is utterly ridiculous. Many courageous and honourable service personnel from many nations fought on the front line. Many fought way beyond it. I'd served 5 tours in Afghanistan. Many alongside my American colleagues. We shed blood, sweat and tears together. And not everybody came home. These are bonds, I think, forged in fire, protecting US or shared interests, but actually protecting democracy overall. And I'd suggest whoever believes these comments, come have a whiskey with me, my colleagues, their families, and importantly the families of those that have made the ultimate sacrifice for both of our nations. It's also worth reminding everyone here in World War II, more British troops landed on D-Day than any other nation. It was an allied response, and united we conquer. Now, some advice for anyone who may be listening. There are 2 great sayings worth remembering. Number 1, there is only one worse thing than working with allies. That is working without them. And when you do, always remember, never above, never below, always side by side.
What is your response to that?
Well, Trump's comments are appalling and they're insulting to all those British veterans, the soldiers who lost their lives, the soldiers who came back with life-changing injuries, and all their families and friends. But people know I've regularly criticised Donald Trump for so much, and I question his character. But I also question the character of British politicians who've been supporting Donald Trump. Nigel Farage called him the bravest man he'd ever met, a man who's dodged military service 5 times. I think Nigel Farage's character is on the line, along with Donald Trump's.
And, you know, Donald Trump has been putting European politicians through the ringer in the last few days with Greenland and the shift back on policies and everything. What do you make of Prime Minister Keir Starmer's response to that?
I'm afraid the British Prime Minister has been too weak with Donald Trump. I've long argued that this bully in the White House only responds to strength. And I've called for our alliances in the UK to be stronger with Europe, stronger with our Commonwealth allies. And we've seen people like Prime Minister Carney from Canada, President Macron from France, and the European Union be far stronger. And they've got Donald Trump to back down. The threat from Europe of the bazooka of retaliatory tariffs sent shockwaves through the stock markets in America, and I think Donald Trump's billionaire friends said you've got to back down. So standing tough and strong against Donald Trump is what is required, what Liberal Democrats have been arguing for. I'm afraid the British Prime Minister and indeed other opposition parties have been too weak.
I mean, do you think that Trump can be appeased?
No, he can't. Yes, there's a role for diplomatic behind-the-scenes cajoling, but when he is being so insulting to our troops, when he's being so hostile to our country and our values, threatening the end of NATO, you cannot do that by appeasement. You have to stand up to him. You've got to be much stronger. And you've got to be stronger with allies in Europe, in the Commonwealth. And if you do that, we've seen time and again that he will back down. So I'm afraid that the British government, the Conservative opposition, the Reform opposition, have just got it wrong here. You've got to be tougher on Donald Trump.
And in your closet?
Yeah, Trump is threatening our economy and our defence, and therefore we need to show we have alternatives. We need to work with our NATO allies in Europe and in Canada and elsewhere to show that we can work together on our defence if America isn't going to turn up. We need to make sure against his protectionism and his damage to the world economic order that we have alternatives by working closely with particularly Europe. Liberal Democrats have called for a new customs union with our European neighbours. That would more than offset the damage being done by Trump and enable us to grow as an economy and help us tackle the cost of living. So we need alternative economic policies given Trump's threats, and it's been Liberal Democrats who've been arguing for those.